I knew something was wrong when my mother moved us into the woods. Submitted by Eek Peek. My shoes scraped against the pavement as I dragged my feet up to the driveway. I never wanted to move. I loved the city, had a lot of friends, and was actually neutral about going to school. I didn't hate it, nor did I love it, but it wasn't bad. I was happy and comfortable living there. The move was so abrupt, I barely had time to say goodbye to my peers. Come on. Let's go. Quit being so miserable. You'll love it here. My mother yelled to me from the front door. You haven't even given it a try. Being mopey isn't going to get you anywhere. Her voice was now becoming more authoritative. I mumbled something about hating my life and started to pick up the pace. Thank you, honey. That's the last of the bags. Why don't you start putting together your bedroom? She said calmly. Yeah. Okay. I'll be there if you need anything else. I could feel the sadness linger after each word I said. I started to unpack my belongings, but after about an hour or so I asked my mother if I could explore what little of a neighborhood we had. She agreed even though there were still stacks of boxes lined up in my room. I did not waste any time though. I put my shoes on and was out of the door. Unpacking was making me even more sad. I thought going outside would help. There weren't many houses nearby. Maybe 6 houses in total, all severely spaced apart from one another. They looked old, really old. It was mainly only forest. Everybody's backyard contained nothing but rough terrain and a lot of thick, tall trees. Our house was no different. The neighborhood looked almost completely deserted. I felt the sadness in my heart grow. I didn't see anybody at all while I was outside, though I wasn't outside for very long. The whole area gave me a bad feeling. No kids were playing. No one was relaxing on their porch. I've never been the type of person to be superstitious, but this entire place knotted my stomach. Everything just fell extremely off. That night, my mom made meatloaf. It's one of my favorites and I figured she made it to try and cheer me up a little. After eating in silence for a few moments, my mother looked up. I could feel her eyes sharp on me, so instinctively swallowed my food and looked back at her. Her face was emotionless. Want to know something interesting? She said. Yeah, sure Mom. I was reaching down to get another bite of food from my fork. I felt uncomfortable, as I could feel her eyes never break their gaze. After taking another bite, I looked up again. My body started to fidget. I felt like I was in trouble. Did I do something wrong? I thought to myself. She set down her fork and rested her chin onto her hands. Did you know you were born here? Right here in this village. I wanted it to be a surprise. You get to grow up in your hometown. Isn't that wonderful? Her voice was monotone, but she was smiling. Though, it honestly did feel forced. I was born here? Why wouldn't you ever tell me this? I'm 17. And never once you told me where I was born? There's literally nothing out here, and I do not want to be here. Why can't I see my friends for senior year, Mom? I tried not to raise my voice, but the more I spoke the louder I became. After the ordeal had ended, I decided to go to bed. I'm a relatively light sleeper. If a pen drops, I'll be wide awake. I always thought it was quite annoying, but I thought of it that night as a blessing. Around 2:46 a.m., I heard 3 loud knocks echoing throughout the hallways. I jumped awake. After listening for a few minutes, I got out of bed and crept to my door. I opened it slowly and slightly, just so I could see. Then I heard it again. Knock knock knock. This time I could hear it clear as day. It was coming from my mom's bedroom. I was immediately creeped the hell out. I closed my bedroom door and got back into bed. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I don't even know if I blinked. I just listened for that sound, those 3 taps. It never happened again that night though. The next morning, while starting to unpack more of our belongings, I couldn't find my mom anywhere. She wasn't in the kitchen, upstairs, front porch, or the basement. Her car was there. Her purse and keys were on the table. Just as I started to walk around the house towards the forest, I saw someone running. As they grew closer, I realized that it was my mother. She was filthy and smelled awful. She was barely wearing anything, and I was repulsed and completely shocked. I was also confused and worried as all hell. I took her inside and ran a bath for her. I waited outside the bathroom door while she washed up. When I had asked her where she had been, she just said nothing. When I asked her if I should call the police, she screamed no very violently. She wouldn't really talk except for the police question I had asked her. Not a single word. When I put her to bed that night, I slept on the couch so I could hear her easily if she woke up. I made sure all of the windows and doors were completely locked in case she was sleepwalking. She had never sleepwalked before though. Nothing happened that night. In fact, things started to get relatively normal. I could tell something was changing though. Every night I would hear my mother sneak out around 2 a.m. I'd hear her footprints sprinting into the forest. Regardless of that, she was always home in the morning and breakfast was always ready. My lunch was always packed. I was doing good in school and was excited to graduate soon. She shared that enthusiasm with me. She seemed normal in that aspect, but there were noticeable signs of other things. She was getting thinner. She had always been a naturally thin woman. But she was thin. After a couple of weeks, you could see every bone and vein. I kept asking her if she was okay, and she kept insisting everything was fine. When I mentioned the woods and what she was doing back there, she would just shut down completely. A few weeks had gone by and my mother was spending more and more time in the woods. The food in the fridge started to mold, and I started cleaning and doing all of the laundry. I even picked up a part-time job. She'd come back and eat all of the raw meat I would buy to feed myself and leave again. She even missed my 18th birthday. Leaves were stuck in her hair and it was matted. I knew I had to do something, but my father had died a few years back, and I didn't want my mother to get locked away. I thought I could handle it on my own. I was wrong. A few days later, I decided to call the police. I told them everything that had happened. The look on their faces were grim as they turned pale. They asked me to come to the station to verify a few things. I happily obliged, but only if they started a search party for my mother immediately. They agreed. Once at the station, they took me back into a windowless room. A detective walked in with a thick folder in his hand. He pulled over a chair and leaned forward, pushing the folder closer to me. I could tell he wanted me to open it, so I did. Horror took over me as I went through the files and photos. I was speechless. They were all missing reports with photos attached to them. Photos of me. We believe you were taken at a very young age. Your DNA confirmed you are indeed this missing child. His voice was comforting. We believe there's something in this forest. You young kids like yourself never seem to live here long. Never even seen a kid past 18. We don't know what these creatures are, but we do know they take children. They can appear in any form or shape. Even replicating your true mother. They're everywhere in places with deep forests. Supposedly, after the birthday of their choosing, the creature will lure you into deep woods and sacrifice you by draining your blood and doing rituals while wearing your skin. I even heard they consume it afterwards. His voice immediately silenced after the last word. I'm just an officer. That's just what I know. It's just a legend. I'm not one to be superstitious, but I've been looking into this for 20 years. Best advice I can give you would be to run. After I talked to the officer, I packed everything I needed and a couple of things I wanted and went to my grandparents. They still haven't found my mother. When I hooked up my laptop, I decided to look up exactly what the officer had described to me. There weren't many results, except for one. It stuck with me. These creatures are always known to be in dark places. They will impersonate someone you care for. They survive off of human flesh. Please use caution. That was it. I haven't been able to sleep or eat again. Then, on top of all of that, my grandmother has been acting weird lately.